Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So I'd like to introduce Janine Yancey. She's she was actually the first outside lawyer for Google, and she went from being a lawyer to an entrepreneur and founded Emtrain. So everyone, please give her a big hand.
Just a little clarification, first outside employment lawyer for Google. They had plenty of corporate lawyers, that's for sure.
Stop that.
Sorry.
We didn't even have some more marketing there. Okay, so part of our interview, one of the first things we do is we kind of want to know to get to know you as a person. So the first question I ask is, where are you from and what did your parents do?
So originally from LA, and mom was a recruiter and dad was a lawyer.
So it's in the genes then.
Yeah. Although I morphed from being a lawyer, it was a friend who had a startup company in the mid '90s. Got me totally hooked. And then when I was spending a lot of time at Google, then I was really hooked. I'm like, okay, forget this law firm life. I need to have a different type of a workplace.
So which goes to what was your first job?
So my first job, I went to Berkeley and then Hastings, and out of Hastings, which is in San Francisco, I started working actually for a plaintiffs law firm, so helping employees sue. And it was at the very, really the very beginning of like harassment type of claims, right? Mm-hmm. And I was representing two professors from UCSF who claimed harassment against this director of their department, and I very quickly realized I did not have the temperament for plaintiffs' work because it's pretty emotional. Although, since moving on, I've talked to some of my friends who do plaintiffs' work, and they're like, Janine, you don't understand. You don't talk to the plaintiffs. So you have someone else do it.
Which is the plaintiff independent, right?
So I quickly switched, and I told my boss, I'm like, you know what? I get this, and this is a really important area for it to be developing. I don't have the temperament for it. I need to get myself on the other side of the fence working with companies and employers, which I did.
So, and I was going through your LinkedIn profile, and it looks like you made partner, which according to Dave, it's a big deal to make partner. So you made partner at your law firm, and so what inspired you to kind of leave that and start Emtrain?
It was really... I'm dating myself, but it was the last .com, I guess people have different versions of the last .com. For me, when I say last .com, it's the late 90s, and I was in San Francisco, and I said, I have to, be a part of this. I need to do something that's fun, more creative, and so I started Emtrain, and I started actually in 2000, and really from 2000.
That was a hard year, actually.
Yeah, and actually from 2000 to 2005, it was really just a thought, and I think this maybe has some relevance to people who are thinking of starting companies, because it was really nothing more than just an idea that I had. And I was still litigating, still practicing law, but at the same time, I was starting to work with a lot of companies, a lot of tech companies, and and I would take what they paid me and run it through Emtrain, this little shell of a corporation.
Okay, so really it was just like a side law firm.
Very much so. So Emtrain did not have any employees until 2006.
Okay, so really it was just sort of you sort of had your style. So when did it start becoming more of what it's become more of, and it's become more almost in a way a little more tech company?
Yeah. So and it's really been just in the last few years. So we've had kind of an interesting evolution. I like to tell people it's reflective of. This is my personal bent, reflective of a female founder. So I had kids. I had all this. I had all these other activities that took precedence. So I was doing that, and then Emtrain was just a little thought. And then we had a relationship with the California Chamber of Commerce for a while, and we had, I think, 4 employees. Because we were just the back engine and they were the sales and marketing engine, and that was great. And then ultimately we parted ways, and it was after we decided to part ways, and that was kind of beginning of 2000. It was 2008, getting 2009, that we started to slowly grow our own team and grow, developers, designers.
So actually, maybe it's a good set. What does the Emtrain do? It's a good place to give people a level set.
So Emtrain, on the surface, we provide corporate training, and I like it to describe it as the training that no one really wants to think about, but it's the training that allows you to either have good work relationships with each other or poor work relationships with each other, right? So it's all the skills and knowledge of how to interact with each other in the workplace. So your wages and hours, your how you treat each other, harassment, discrimination, diversity, inclusion. We also do, on the business side, your ethics and code of conduct and insider trading. So it's not professional skills, we call them business and work skills. What we're doing that's a little bit different, though, and what we think is kind of taking things to like a new place is we're disrupting how people get their information in corporations. So typically, at least theoretically, you're supposed to get your information from corporate HR or corporate legal. And through the years, I've just seen, colleagues have seen that communication gap is broken. People don't talk to HR, they don't talk to legal. And typically, they'll just close their eyes and take their best guess. So what we're doing is all of our titles are associated with experts, industry-leading experts, outside people, not Emtrain people. And we connect people straight to the experts through an anonymous Q&A feature, kind of like a Quora. And we just launched that this year, and we've seen kind of I want to say it's like probably a 10 to 15-fold increase in the number of questions. And now we're guaranteeing everyone's privacy, and we're starting to take the questions and answers and feed them back to the companies, but redacted to safeguard the people's privacy. So for example, we just had a tech company backed by Google Ventures take one of our courses, and one of the learners had an issue. It's kind of like an ethics hotline, really. And it was what I'd call a red flag issue, where, trust me, that in-house lawyer would definitely want to know about that issue like that. So I sent it on to in-house legal. I redacted the name. In-house legal said, can you give me the department number? And I looked to see if there were enough people in that department so that that person's identity would not be disclosed, and there were enough, and so I gave the department number, and it allowed in-house legal to do something proactive rather than respond.
It's really interesting because I actually didn't realize how you really become more of a technology company.
So just like you're seeing all these internet companies that are taking very, very traditional services and taking a tech edge to it. I mean, Uber, really. I mean, it's a pretty traditional service. We're doing the same thing. We certainly have more developers and product designers, than anyone else in our team.
Right.
And it's disrupting how people get information and guidance in a company.
No, I definitely see the value of it, and how like when I dealt with HR, you never really felt when I worked at a big company.
Right.
As an employee, HR really worked for the company, and so no one really felt they had. No one ever felt like they were anonymous.
Right.
So it's interesting where it's completely redacted. So
and what I love is, so we're now working with companies like Yelp and Netflix and Dropbox, and Yelp was great because they love this, and they said this is an employee benefit, and that's how they're marketing it to their workforce.
Yeah,
that they're allowing their employees to have a channel to get some information that is neutral, unbiased, third-party expert information.
And it goes both ways, so information comes back. You can have a dialogue.
Well, exactly. I mean,
anonymous.
so the HR and the legal people love it because for the first time, and as a lawyer, I always look at it like, lawyers are usually the ones that have to clean up the mess, right? So you don't usually get a chance to jump in proactively and arrange the situation so it's a productive situation, and the pieces are already set by the time you get on the scene. And so this allows them to jump in before the pieces are all set.
So, as I'm thinking about your company, so you kind of went from this sort of like, in some ways it sounded like Emtrain was more of a law firm for you. So how did you sort of evolve from this to, right now, if I were to look at what you're doing, it is a technology. You're selling a technology, like maybe an Uber of, employment law, so to speak, but it's a technology component. Mm-hmm. So how did you sort of evolve into that?
I always had an idea of what it was. I certainly saw a need in the marketplace, and I had some ideas on how to address that need. Mm-hmm. And I think it just took me a while because I'm not the typical founder, right? So I come from a legal background, not corporate law. So the labor and employment law piece is kind of a weird thing. Mm-hmm. By the time I was actually fully committed to Emtrain and working, full time, I was here in Sacramento, which brings its own challenges as opposed to being in the Bay Area, which is where I was when I started the company. So I didn't have the network or the access to really, guidance and people to do what I knew I wanted to do early on. So I've had to take the slow road.
So eventually, at some point, you had to, hire a developer. You had to hire a product manager.
So we had a developer early on. I mean, in 2000, just to give you finger on the pulse, in 2002, I connected with a good buddy of mine who's got a PhD from MIT, and I said I need a developer, and he gives me this group of software developers in San Francisco that built a learning management system for us because we need a database platform to launch and track online courses. And they were, classic struggle with, pure software developers that are not connected to the user design, user experience. So I got a database, and let me tell you, that was a database. It's like, oh, you built us a database, all right? And we ultimately had to take that and morph it. And we had somebody, and he's my co-founder, and ultimately, he learned how to develop. So he was not a professional developer, wow. But he learned how to develop, and he modified it. And we launched Zappos on that database in 2003.
Wow.
We launched the training to their whole workforce. And since then, we obviously hired professional developers, but initially it was jerry-rigged.
You got some. So in that time, what are some of the challenges? You mentioned sort of the product development. What's some of the challenges you've seen in it? And you've been around for 15 years, so that's actually a long time. So what are some of the challenges you've seen, and how have you overcome them?
I think, and I think I have a better sense of this looking back than I had as I was going through these experiences. So. Looking back, I see pretty clearly that, not being in an environment where a network where you have quick, ready answers, that's why communities like this are so important, where you can just email or call somebody and say, okay, what do I do here? What do I do there? And just get, the quick hit so that you don't have to learn things the hard way. That was probably my biggest challenge. So it's just not being networked in and figuring things out really the hardest way possible. I mean, just one example, and now it just sounds, it sounds so common sense to me, but truly, like the golden nuggets usually do sound like common sense. But for the longest time, I did not, there's a term for it, I think it's like leveling up or something, but as your organization goes through stages and gets bigger and bigger, the talent that you have is usually not the right talent, right? So there's a question of, who do you have on the bus, and which seat on the bus do they, are they occupying? And so, looking back, I hung on too long to people that I had on the bus because I wanted to foster a good workplace, and I was appreciative. But at the end of the day, you've got to operate like a business, and you have to make some hardcore decisions. And I think that that was one of my challenges. I didn't make those decisions quick enough so that I could bring the talent on board to get us to the next level. Right. To the point where now I'm very quick to make those decisions, and people look and are like, "Oh, gee, you're a little bit rough," but you kind of have to.
Oh, okay, so now we'll talk more HR stuff. So, and I'm a startup, and I work with a lot of startups. HR is not the first thing we think. We're thinking about trying to get the product out. We're trying to think about getting funding. At what point should a startup start thinking about HR issues?
So there's kind of a nuts and bolts guideline and then a practical guideline, right? So, nuts and bolts, I'd say, as soon as you're more than a ragtag group, as soon as you're at least, under state law, as soon as you have 5 employees, you're on the hook to, follow all these laws, right? As a practical matter, is it 5 employees? I'd probably,
Is that 5 1099 employees or 5 like W-2?
5 W-2.
Okay.
As a practical matter, I think HR starts cropping up issues, when you're 20, 30 employees. Typically when, like for HR professionals, they'll usually say, you need, if not a full-time HR person, at least a regular part-time HR person helping you out. As soon as you start getting to 40, 30, 40 employees. And the reason being is, in addition to any guidelines or regs or laws that you may or may not inadvertently be violating, you'll also have issues. When you get people under one roof, people are people, and people bring issues with them. And they may not necessarily be legal issues, but there'll be conflicts that turn into lack of productivity that makes you trip and fall as an organization, right? So as a startup, the name of the game is people working cohesively, working productively, not fighting, not bickering, talking and getting along so that they can build out a product. And HR issues are the antithesis of that.
Okay. And actually, you brought so this is sort of interesting. What advice would you give to someone in how to fire somebody? Or you just fire them, or you're out?
So, my rule of thumb is, and I've been doing this for a long time, watching cases, litigating cases, and, I'm of the belief that, for the most part, people will only bring a claim if they are super angry at you, right? And they don't, by letting somebody go and separating employment doesn't mean that they have to be super angry at you. So it's just doing it humanely, with respect, being very transparent. And that actually generates goodwill. So for example, I was telling Laura, there's a headline, Twitter, I guess, laid off 8% of their workforce.
Right.
And I haven't read into it, but the headline, it could be sensationalized, says, by phone. That's not a good way to do it. That's going to engender some negative, will.
No, I actually didn't hear it was done by phone. Yikes.
I just saw one person interviewed and said, oh, yeah, I got a phone message, which, law firms, in the 90s were infamous for doing that. I remember many situations hearing about law firms where the young lawyers would get back to their desk, see that they had a message, and get the message, and you've been terminated, get your things and leave.
So I guess what is the ideal way, to let go of somebody, fire somebody?
So generally, it should never be a surprise.
Okay.
So if the person's shocked and surprised, that you're doing something wrong.
Do you need to document it and have like a plan and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, with all HR issues and discipline, termination, hiring, performance reviews. And this is, I know people, moan and groan about documentation, but there's a reason why you document. And this is part of that, where, half of it is just forcing you to do your legwork, right? So that you're not flying by the seat of your pants, ill-prepared, and just winging it. Winging it is never a good thing. So you need to spend the time, think about what you're going to say, practice in front of the mirror a little bit. And then deliver it, as nicely and respectfully as you can, and wait for the other person to, engage. It's all about, being respectful. So yeah, you want to document it. You always want to have, some kind of a summary so that some third person off the street can look at the documentation and, in a minute, understand exactly what went on. The minute you have to start, arguing about factual issues, you're not in a good spot.
And that's even necessary if like California said at will, which means, theoretically you could fire anybody at will, right? But you still have to do all this? Or you should?
You should.
Okay. All right. So actually, I want to open it up to questions from the audience. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, you said you disrupting the way that information is shared. Wondering your perspective on how the format of information, say like length and media type, has changed the last 10 or 15 years. Do you deliver a lot of the information via video? Is it, what's your delivery system and how has that changed?
So excellent question. Did everyone hear the question? The question is, how has the delivery method of content or information changed? And it has absolutely changed. I was just at a conference, was it last week? Earlier this week, I guess. No, last week. So last week for chief ethics officers of large multinational corporations. And we were all talking about the fact that you used to be able to deliver a code of conduct and ethics course that would be 45, minutes, maybe an hour. And we've all shortened it down to like 20, 25 minutes. And I'm working, or Emtrain's working with a lot of startup companies. So, I just met with Uber 2 weeks ago, Square. And for that, workforce, the average age is about 25. So we're actually now, this is one of our new products that we're releasing, is we're doing little 3-minute video lessons. So forget about a whole course. People don't have the attention span for a whole course. And we're just doing a video lesson, and we say it takes 3 minutes for the lawyer or the HR to put together, and 3 minutes for the other person to consume. And it's a quick hit.
So are you seeing changes with the millennials going into the workforce, like how people are interacting with the millennials?
Absolutely.
So what are some of the things that you're seeing with the millennials? The 3-minute thing, I assume, is a millennial.
That's
product.
definitely millennial driven. I look at it as, I think it's good and bad. I mean, the positive part of the millennial influence on the greater workforce is the millennial generation is demanding service, which is great, because older generations were conditioned not to be so demanding, right? So they didn't speak up. They were not like me, myself, and I want it right now. Millennial generation, for whatever reason, and these are all obviously huge generalizations, but you see it more. And the corporation is responding to that. And big picture, that's a good thing for everyone because everyone is benefiting, right? So, for example, we're having a lot of dialogue and debates in HR and ethics circles about, how do we deliver compliance type information to rank and file, right? And it used to be that lawyers and HR people were all very top down. It's like, we don't care what they think. Too bad. They have to do it. Basically take a club over the head. They're like, this is it, and we're going to dot our I's, cross our T's, and check off that you've seen the policy. Yes, they've seen the policy. Sign their name. Yes, they've signed their name. Do they have any friggin' idea what's in the policy? No, but we don't care, right? That's been the prevailing attitude for years and years and years. That's changing now, and it's changing because of millennials. And millennials are like, don't ask me to sign off on some stupid policy that I haven't read. And don't ask me to spend an hour of my precious time looking at some stupid, boring page turner. And people are responding, which is great.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. I would just took it.
Right. And so what I do. So, let me just kind of balance it out, because that's the good side. The bad side, and this is a bigger issue, which, Emtrain is, one small company in a much larger ed tech field, right? So in the larger ed tech field, we are, dialoguing about the fact that, prior generations would spend the time and, the effort to get through a lengthy, complicated, piece of content. And that is, not necessarily true for younger generations. And that's, I think we haven't seen the ramifications of that yet.
You can't boil everything down to a 3-minute soundbite.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that easy, and I think, and it's this attitude of just instantaneous gratification, right? So all of these services we have, and we're all benefiting from them, right? You touch your screen, you get this. You do that, you get that. I mean, it's just so easy, and maybe I'm just being an old person by saying this, but I get concerned about how easy it is and the ramifications on us as people and how our brain works. I'm a big fan of the Daniel Kahneman book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, and the idea that the slower you think, the slower you kind of, just pace yourself, the better, because you'll get a better work product. And we're not doing that,
It's very instantaneous. Laura?
I have a question more along the lines of growing a startup in the world of HR.
Yeah.
So, so you bootstrapped your company. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you would bootstrap rather than first seeking funding? Which I think bootstrapping is good. But I think a lot of startup companies are like, the number one, we need to go get outside funding. But what are some of the benefits of bootstrapping first?
Yeah, so there's definitely some pros and cons. So just, for everyone in the room. So Emtrain is still bootstrapped. We're about to take, a bridge loan of $1 million right now. We're going to also, at this point in our evolution, maturity, I have multiple connections of VC firms down in Menlo Park, Palo Alto, and we could easily, and we will get, real capital soon, because we need it for what we need to do. Having said that, I started off bootstrapping just because I had no other choice. I wasn't networked, I wasn't connected, I wasn't the typical founder. At some point along the road, I did have a choice, and I've had multiple choices to sell so that I would never need to work again. I've had multiple choices to take private equity money, so not venture capital, but private equity money. And I've turned that down, and the reason being is I think that there's a huge benefit to evolving your business and what you really want to accomplish, and how you want to accomplish it before you take money. Because once you take money, you've got so many external pressures to grow, and you might be growing in a direction and you don't even have a clue what you're really doing yet. And then you've got external people pressuring you, right? So, luckily I don't have the external pressure of some person on my board saying, you know what, Janine, you're going to sell. You've gotten multiple offers. I could have had a really nice, return on my investment. So screw you. And that's what happens a lot. I know many people that have had that situation happen to them, and I've not been in that place, and so that's a good sign.
So you maintain control of your company.
Well,
and
maintain control at least until, I'm thinking about it as like a little bird in a nest, until it can fly on its own, right, and it's on its way. But until it can fly, you really, as the founder, there is no one with a better grasp and understanding of the marketplace and your place in the marketplace than you. And so that's why it's important, as well as just being, smart and strategic how you spend money. So as an example, because this just happened, we're partnering with a company right now that just got several rounds of venture capital money, and it's like monopoly money. So we did a joint webinar, and they spent $50,000 like that, just like woof. I had this image in my head, like we actually got more people to this webinar than they did, and we spent zero on our part. And the webinar was successful. It was great. But as the founder and the chief money person, I'm looking at. I have this image of just the dollar bills going out the window, and I know the gal. She's like 26, 27. She's in San Francisco, and I'm like, oh my God, she just spent $50,000. Does she have any idea? And I know the venture capital folks that are backing this company. They'd probably have a little bit of a heart attack if they knew. So it's best that they don't. Yeah.
Are you getting a lot of pushback from HR and general counsels that the messages are anonymous and they can't find out who is sending them?
Great question. So we have, less so now, but I was on a road show for a long time, and that's why I met with Dropbox, Netflix, Uber, Square, Yelp, Pinterest, because they're all freaking out. And I had to get them to the point where they were not freaking out. And I said, listen, this is going to be better for you. And now they're at the point where they're like, oh, wow. And so, we're giving them, kind of a heads up on certain issues that they can take care of. We're giving them, and this is not designed in the product yet, but it will be soon, where, just like any, LinkedIn or any marketing automation software like HubSpot gives you kind of a nice little summary of, okay, you had X number of interactions this week. We'll be able to do that to a company. So like Yelp will say, okay, Yelp, you had, 500 Yelpers ask questions. Here are the questions. Here are the answers given. You won't know who asked those questions, but for in-house legal and HR, they're going to dig it, and they're already seeing it, and they're like, oh, this is great. I get to report to the C-suite exactly what I'm doing and where we need to spend our time and focus. It gives them visibility, really, for the first time.
Janine, how do you integrate the service and the message that you're providing with in-house HR? And is there a point? I'm not sure I understand at what point they need HR in-house. So you talked about, when you get to 2030, and especially for your employees, you're going to want at least one person in-house. So how does that work with you in these larger companies?
As I tell these folks, we are their biggest cheerleaders and promoters. So if you go on the Emtrain site, and right now it's it's nothing to look at. Like I said, it'll be more like a Quora soon. But at the bottom of our website, you'll see Q&A. If you click on it, it'll bring up, at this point, hundreds and hundreds of questions and answers. And you'll see over and over and over again in the answers, it'll say, this really, needs the experience and the skill of your people ops team. So, for example, one of the questions recently, and I feel like we're Dear Abby, so one of the questions was, from this one person saying, okay, so, in San Francisco, like here too, it's all open, you're working side by side with people, and the person was saying, this guy has BO. It's really bad. No, this is welcome to the world of HR. This is actually a typical HR question. And it's really bad, and I don't know what to say, and what do I do? And so that's definitely one where you say, okay, this is where the people ops team pay for themselves. Go get your people ops person, and they are skilled and experienced in having these delicate conversations. Do not try this on your own, please.
Good question.
What are your goals for Emtrain?
So I think Emtrain, Emtrain could do really cool things. The idea of empowering people with real insight and information on the best way to interact with coworkers and what their rights are. That's really not happening right now. And to be able to do that at scale internationally would be amazing. So I kind of look at what we're doing as, a little bit of a blend between what Glassdoor is doing and what LinkedIn is doing. So it's very Glassdoor-esque, which is Glassdoor is a customer of ours. But it's, in my mind, better than Glassdoor because, the employers don't like Glassdoor, right? And the employers are like, oh, great, I have to deal with this. And it's all this negative, and it's usually a gripe fest. The only positive reviews on Glassdoor are when management says, okay, Gary, please go on there and do something for me. So it's not real, it's not authentic, and the employers have no control. In our service, the employers have control. We're giving employers control. So it's Glassdoor-esque, but it's also LinkedIn-esque, but I think better in that we're aligning ourselves with all these industry experts, right? So insider trading, we have an expert who came out of the Department of Justice. He's got the biggest insider trading bust, I think, in Northern California. He's now in private practice, and he's like the go-to guy for insider trading. He's the guy, if you're in a company, especially a public company, or, a law firm, because the most recent insider trading busts have been actually in Wilson Sonsini and other big law firms. He's the guy you want to anonymously ask, all right, can I do this? And then he would answer. And he's doing it because it's great biz dev. So all of our experts are, we're a platform for them to brand themselves.
So in some ways, I was thinking, Glassdoor is what I started thinking about, but in some ways you're preventing bad.
Exactly.
Glassdoor is like
Glassdoor,
after the fact.
it's
after the fact, and it's
the
public.
mess is already created and it's public. And
Right.
it's bad.
So, but this is sort of preventing that
Exactly.
from getting on the Glassdoor in a way.
Right.
Another question over here, Sarah?
And so do you pay, or does Emtrain pay the experts?
Some of them we do, and some we don't. It just really depends on their particular motivation and situation. So our newest expert that I'm super excited about is this woman named Joelle Emerson. So her specialty is managing unconscious bias. She's been in TechCrunch a few times. She's been working with all the big tech teams, and she's got a great live program. And she's asked us to produce her program, but in an online piece. And that, coupled with this ability to ask anonymous questions, I think is just going to be so potent. But for her, it's less about biz dev and more about a vehicle to scale. And so, she gets a royalty. But so it really just depends.
And one more question. When did you go after the Netflixes and the LinkedIns?
Why did I or did not?
Yeah, why did you?
Because they're why I started a company in the first place. I love working with tech teams. So, for example, Netflix, and she knows it too. The HR director, she's planning it. She wants us to go on their campus for a few days and shoot a custom course, and and this is the other kind of benefit of being bootstrapped and having autonomy and flexibility. I might just do that, even though it's not a good business decision, but just to hang out at Netflix for a few days.
Laura?
Kind of along those same lines, I think all startup companies would like to have Pinterest, Uber, Square, Yelp, Netflix as customers.
Yeah.
How did you get in the door at these tech companies? Did you have a particular strategy, or what was your secret sauce to get in there?
Really the product. So, when it comes to the world of workplace training, there's not too many teams that are operating like internet companies and bringing the type of design and engagement to the content that we are. We're really focused on that. And then, along those lines, our newest, harassment course, which is, a big course because it's legally mandated for teams over 50 employees. We broke it into episodes, and the first episode is based on the GitHub issue. I don't know if folks are familiar, but GitHub is a big tech team, right? And they had a pretty public issue. I think it was March of 2014, and there was a senior, UX design person upset and making a claim of bias to the founder and other people on the team. And there are plenty of people arguing on Twitter about it, and so we shot a video about it. And so that video, really more than anything else, is what's really resonating. And in fact, I've been, and I'll just, I'll say it's an unnamed tech team in San Francisco, a few thousand employees. And the in-house counsel that I met with said, she was looking at this video depiction of the scene, right, based on the GitHub issue. And she just watched it, and she said, Janine, look to the right, look to the left, that scene is happening right now. So, being able to really capture what's going on in tech and being able to do so in a way that people learn from it and it raises their awareness so that they're better able to navigate certain workplace situations, I think that's why we're getting the response we are.
You have a question?
Yeah. So you're facilitating a lot of communication for HR. Do you see yourself facilitating other types of communication beyond that type of relationship?
We focus on HR, business compliance, and talent management. And talent management is probably like a distant third.
Talent management.
It's just your people skills, right? But it's really those three, genres, if you will, are really siloed in the enterprise, in a corporation, and they don't have a lot of connection and good communication with people, in the trenches. And that's why we want to be the conduit for getting their messages out properly to the people in the trenches, and then also feed back information and insight and visibility to those folks.
Okay, last question.
I was wondering, how did you decide on your pricing? Like from free, a lot of people just give stuff away for free, to $1,000 a year. Like over the years, how did you decide how to get that right, formula?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and I don't think we're exactly there. No. I mean, so to a certain extent, we're in an established marketplace, and there are, general pricing parameters that vendors are in, and we're there too. This big conference I was at, we were talking about these new video lessons, our newest product, giving those away for free, so having it be a freemium product. And I had more than a few chief compliance officers, just stop and look at me and like, what? Are you crazy? But I was really transparent. I said, hey, we're organic. We're still bootstrapped. The competitor over here is doing $200 million a year, and they have probably 5, 6, 7 million more to spend on marketing every year. I said, we don't have that. And so this is our way of marketing, and we hope that, if you find it of value, once in a while, you'll throw us a bone. And people really, they like that message. They're like, oh, okay, great.
All right, so my final question for you is, who's your favorite superhero?
So it's on my website. It's Wonder Woman.
All right. Let me introduce you to a new superhero. It's Samurai Yancey.
Oh,
So
cool.
I want to thank you for coming and speaking with us and supporting our community.
Thank you, Rich.
And thank you very much for coming today.